Your scaffold needs to explain to me and to yourself what each paragraph will be doing. It's used both to plan out what else you need to answer your question, to support your thesis, and also to show you where the gaps lie in your research so that you can go and fill out your research. So I'm going to walk you through this example that I did to complement or as a part of the lens of analysis that I posted about modernity. Notice in the thesis there it says, while cities in Great Britain modernized due to the Industrial Revolutions, the villages ... I thought when I started my research that I was going to say the villages did not modernize. I found out during my research that in fact the villages did modernize a little bit. So I've left this ... because I'm not exactly sure how I want to finish that sentence. That thesis should be carried through at the thesis line for every single scaffold paper you have. Notice I put up the question at the top, did the Industrial Revolution modernize all of Great Britain equally? And the lens of analysis is David Christian's criteria for modernity, which you can see in the lens of analysis sample. In column 1, that is my intro. See the intro indicator at the very top. I'm going to start with a hook. I'm going to give you my ID of modernization during the Industrial Revolution. I'm going to name the lens of analysis, which is modernity, or David Christian's standards for modernity. And I'm going to move down and I'm going to put my thesis as my so what at the end of the first paragraph. Second paragraph is lens of analysis. You can look at what I wrote for the sample. Notice that the so what is to be considered modern a society should either reflect some progress in all criteria or a lot of progress in some criteria. My third paragraph originally was different, but when I looked at my thesis, I thought before I can start explaining why cities were modern, I had to actually explain the context of the Industrial Revolution. So notice it says subtopic, explain Great Britain society pre-IR. I had to tell you what existed ahead of time. So I start mostly agricultural production, subsistence and economic activity made by, stuff made by hand. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the social structure, the family, the role of women, but I forgot to research that. So I actually have to go back and find that. According to your directions, I would highlight that yellow to kind of indicate to me that I had to go do something about it. And I need to figure out if there was any political structure, overall for the Industrial Revolution, for Great Britain pre-IR, and maybe some religion. The reason that I'm doing that is because if you go to the lens of analysis that I previously published, it gives you 12 criteria. And so I've got to somehow show in my paragraph 3 somehow all of those criteria pre-IR, so I have something to contrast my modernity part with. Notice how the so what at the bottom says pre-IR, Great Britain was not modern. Moving down to my next paragraph, my fourth paragraph, I note at the top, my subtopic is I have to explain the changes of the Industrial Revolution. Do not discuss modernity criteria. I'm telling that to myself. So my topic sentence is, the IR changed production from hand to machine, which in turn changed society. And then I say, okay, first topic I have to do is production changed. It increased surplus. There was trade. Political representation increased. Because I filled this out fast, I just was trying to show you. I didn't fill out the rest of it. My so what at the bottom, Great Britain as a whole became more modern. Paragraph 5, city changes show a high degree of modernity. I'm going to tell you what those are. You know what? I didn't do all my research for this, and so I've got some work to do. Paragraph 6, village changes show a high degree of agricultural productivity. Well, in the lens of analysis that I have in paragraph 2, it says something about modernity had a high degree of productivity. And this is where I had to change my thesis, or I've got to change my thesis because I thought villages were not modern, but now I look and say, oh yeah, they did have high agricultural productivity. Moving down to my 7th paragraph, I now elaborate, or I now explore villages with another criteria of modernity, and that would be a population increase. One of David Christian's criteria for modernity was an increased population. And while we know that happened to cities, and we know that villages, a lot of villages lost their population to cities, that would indicate that villages were less modern. And so I'm going to explore that. What am I going to include under that? I'm going to say, well, I found like 4 examples of different villages that lost population. This is what they were beforehand. This is what they weren't. They were like by the this point in the Industrial Revolution. Who was left? What kind of what other population demographics were they? Were they all the young people that left? Were they? So that's my research. I have to tell you what was different about the population of that village. So facts, reasons, examples, details. The threads go in that. So I do have a whole paragraph worth of information for that. And my 8th paragraph would be the village politics with it. If you look back at my lens of analysis, there were different criteria about representation, so I've got to do some research on that. And so now I've got paragraphs 6, 7, and 8 that detail the village standards of modernity, and my 9th paragraph is going to be my concluding paragraph where I wrap together the so what's of my paragraphs, and I say something to the extent of, while villages had increased agricultural productivity that might make them seem modern, everything else about them, their population, etc., indicates that they weren't, that only the cities in Britain really got modern, and everybody else was kind of sitting back on their farms being kind of old-fashioned. End of research.